Hi, and welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I am your host, Chris Wells, VP of Research and Development at Indico Data. And my guest today is Peter Camp of CampTek Software, CTO and founder. Peter, how are you today?
Good. How you doing, Chris?
Good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and then what you all do over at CampTek?
Sure, that would be great. Yeah, so I'm Peter Camp, founder, CTO of CampTek Software. I've been in automation for better part of 20 years, doing RPA development. Previously worked at a company where built a RPA product from the ground up, similar to UiPath. So I know all the tips and tricks and the strengths and weaknesses of the tech. My company, CampTek Software, has been around for almost 5 years. We approach this a little differently than some of the other leading RPA vendors out there, service providers. We've tackled this from a managed service perspective from the beginning, because I think that's the best way to handle this and support. So we really build all our solutions with a focus on support from beginning to end. So when we scope something, we build it, we have a methodology in and around that. We've had quite a bit of success in, healthcare, supply chain, financial services, even retail started to pick up a little bit lately. So, we're closely aligned with UiPath, and obviously we're partners of Indico as well. So,
Let's let that cat out of the bag right away. Yeah, strong partnership. Watch this space, as they say, for good things coming. Great. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that rundown, Peter. It sounds like, if I'm hearing all of that correctly, you're really deep and wide when it comes to RPA and all things automation. Is that fair?
yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we tell our clients is we have a best of breed approach providing solutions. So, in the case of like Indico versus, some of the other document understanding tools, every, Indico does its job really well with certain types of unstructured data where you may not need it for something that's more highly structured.
Yep.
Or there's kind of a good example there. It's the same thing with the RPA approach or even solutions or activities we call within our RPA bots. We always try to figure out the best and cheapest and highest ROI solution set.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a theme of this podcast. Right tool for the job, and
Yeah.
you guys certainly have the expertise to know how to choose that. So it's gonna be great to dig in. Um, why don't you start by I'm really interested in the introduction. You talked about seeing, offering RPA as a managed service to begin with. What is it that convinced you that over your, long career of doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, I've been in this space for about 20 something years, but originally I worked for a legacy RPA company. And when I first got hired there, they were doing a lot of trainings, training people how to build, scripts, or what we're calling bots these days.
Yep.
Um, as the time went on, less and less of those people on the client side were wanting to take the trainings or even available or didn't have the right background. So customers came to us to help them support these bots that were already in production. And,
Mm,
so it kind of became more of a services approach versus just a straight technology software approach. And, as RPA's evolved, with UiPath and others really taking this to scale and at the enterprise, saw that in like 2017, 18, that if this thing's really gonna, scale from a wide level, you have to have support. You need to have managed services around it because companies can't hire quick enough to keep
yep.
up with the tech. Not to mention, there's a million different pieces or tech that you can use. I mean, Indico, you can use Google, you can use Microsoft. Now you have Chat GPT coming up. I mean,
Yeah.
it's on and on. I mean, there's no way anyone can keep ahead of that curve. So you need to have managed services companies where their job is to keep ahead of the curve, understand what's good, kind of figure out which direction to go based on the need.
That's great. There are a lot of areas in there that you covered. So, I can think of sort of just day-to-day operations, oversight, QA. What's the spectrum of services that you offer and your clients find valuable?
Yeah, I mean, well, on the whole delivery front, we do everything from
Okay.
scoping, identification, onto development, testing, QA of everything, support. Support is really where all our bots are at this point. Majority of our bots
Okay.
are. Try to get it out of the development into support. So whether it be an IDP solution or a straight back office unattended robot or attended robot, those
Yeah.
things go to support and have. That's basically step one.
Great. Okay. All right. So you talked about the proliferation of tools and shiny new toys these
Yeah.
days, like Chat GPT. Tell me one of the things that has become critical for really getting the most out of your automation solution is finding a good IDP solution or cobbling one together from a number of different tools. So talk to me a little bit about how you and CampTek Software think about unstructured data. How is it different? How is it the same? What are the unique challenges?
Yeah, so we think of it in three different ways, like most do: structured, semi-structured, and then finally unstructured. So structured is what I would call, legacy OCR techniques, positional. Data doesn't move, fixed form. You know, Frankly, there's free OCR tools out there that can do the job at this point.
Yeah,
Um, Even those have gotten better. you know 10 years ago, they had a hard time just reading text.
yeah,
Now it's highly sophisticated, even on over the shelf. So the semi-structured is really where a majority of the use cases traditionally have come from. In my opinion, like Abby has done a lot of work in semi-structured.
yep,
UiPath, a lot of work in semi-structured. And it's really become very fuzzy, and it becomes hard for clients to understand the difference between semi-structured and completely unstructured. And I'll even go a step further to say it's not just
yeah,
unstructured. You know, this piece of data could be anywhere on the screen, but is it unstructured need based on the volume? So like if you have semi-structured and you only
huh,
have, you know, I don't know, let's say you're processing 100 a month, you can get that limping, you can limp those through, with back end support. But if you're talking like millions of documents a year or millions of pages a year, 7, 10, 12, you need something that can handle the level of volume and handle anything that comes through. So you could be majority semi-structured, 60% semi-structured, but it's the 40% that will kill you that's not.
yeah,
And if you're pulling in a lot of different sources, this use case we're working on with you guys, I mean, they have thousands of physician offices pouring in these orders from all
yeah.
different states. And, they don't know, they may have worked with a doctor one time, they may have worked with a doctor 100 times. They may work with, so the repeatability isn't really there, but the need for the discrete pieces of data are.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, which is even if one document is sort of you know semi-structured, and the next one is semi-structured, slightly different. If you got millions of documents, millions of pages, like even getting your arms around the problem initially to define it in a semi-structured way, you know, that's months or years of work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you look at it strategically for us being a managed service. So obviously we want to make money on support, right?
Yeah,
We want to get people to support, but we also need to make money too. We don't want to spend infinite amount of resources supporting an IDP initiative, because with the retraining or training of the models. So I think Indico to me has the best solution, best go to market at volume, high volumes, where you basically build it, correct it, and it's continuing to learn on its own. But the benchmark where it starts is a lot higher from a reliability standpoint than any tool that we've seen.
it's an amazing compliment. I happen to agree with you. Uh, and I'll encourage the folks out there who are curious to either talk to you or me about what's possible. Coming back to that point of what is possible, what do you see unlocking access to unstructured data potentially doing for organizations and for the knowledge workers within those organizations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the value is so high if you really think about taking all these digitized assets and making them understandable, and not having that middle swivel chair person who's processing them,
Mm,
both from a labor standpoint and I think from an accuracy standpoint. as well as a speed to business and speed to decisions. If we think about this, I'm actually in the middle of a blog right now thinking about what it would look like, in 10 years, truly having unstructured data solutions that could really handle a lot of these review situations. I mean, we work with customers that are having to review faxes, hundreds and thousands of pages of faxes a day, and they have a team of people doing this, reviewing that they get this information. And a lot of the data is exactly the same, but it needs to be put into a system exactly the same way. We're
Yeah.
working with you guys, doing physician orders, and there's a team of people that are having to look at each one of these orders every single day, look through and make sure this information is not only reflected in the order, then also in the system of record. And they have to
Yeah.
go through two different steps to do that. And that is a very, very common use case. But I think regardless of what industry you're in, financial services, supply chain, healthcare, wherever, there's that middleman or middle person that's having to process this stuff. And it can't be just done automatically without some type of logic behind it. So
Yeah.
it's not simply grabbing the data and putting it someplace, but actually making some type of decision to reflect that it is accurate.
Yeah, I love that. I love that framing of speed to decision. And I also, because we're seeing the same thing right now in the insurance industry broadly, just whether it's claims or underwriting, quote submissions,
Right.
the person that gets, the company that gets that data out the fastest and to a point where you can look at it and say, yep, quote it, nope, deny the claim. They're the ones that get paid first. And so I like thinking about that 10-year future. It's kind of an arms race, right? The
Yeah.
folks that get there first and the fast followers have an advantage. There's some real potential for companies to be left behind in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think not only with IDP, but even RPA and implementing, I'd say bread and butter RPA, bots to just alleviate some of the work.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about complete digital transformation just yet, but even that, just getting that off the ground, I think would make a huge impact, for a majority of companies. And you know, we've seen, from 2018 to 23, a real evolution in this market. High COE usage in 18, 19, companies building their own, practices, and
Yeah.
and then 2020 kind of really scrambled that all up as budgets got constrained, and the bots that were built in 18 and 19, whether it be a solution provider coming in or a COE or turnover, a lot of these bots are like on the shelf right now.
Mm.
Huge opportunity to go back and fix them or get people realigned. I mean, we have several new customers coming online just with that particular problem.
Huh.
And I think there's a lot more out there. With that being said, I think, as we move forward, because IDP in 2018 and 19 is far different than it is right now. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, it's an arms race. Everyone's really, there's a lot of value. I think a lot of revenue coming into this particular space, and companies that may have evaluated solutions, in 18, 19, now they come back in 23 and it's like, gosh, well, I didn't realize this was out there. So, and that's why we're advocates of what you guys are doing, what you guys are trying to do, because we feel like it is the best of breed.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say that 18-19 era, it was 5 to 10 to 1 hype to actual,
Yep.
meat in the sausage when it came to those technologies. And so a lot of people got burned,
Yeah.
by vaporware. And now, it, like I said, I do think we're the best, but there's a lot of really good stuff out there. And one of the key things is finding someone who's done this before and the right technology to do it with. And so that, that makes me super pumped about this partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if you look at the strength that UiPath brought to the market, the reliability,
Yeah.
um, and it's really not, a lot of times it's not, I'd say 99.5% of the time, the reliability isn't, unreliability is not a result of the technology. It's more around the implementation, identification of good use cases, proper support and maintenance, um,
Change management.
change management, yes, and all that. It's not. It's the technology is definitely there, and there's a lot of different ways if it's not there to improve it, in a custom way too. So, we feel really strongly that the go to market with the technologies that are out there right now can make a lot of this realistic versus, before 10 years ago, it really wasn't realistic to the scale that was, needed.
No, yeah, it was science fiction. The only companies that had any technology like this, they were using it for themselves, and they're probably building it into products like Google Search and
Right.
Facebook. Right? It was all locked up. Um, I want to look. I want to keep looking at the future a little bit. So 10 years from now, and I don't want to steal the thunder from your blog post, but it's an interesting topic. So we've gone through this arms race. Some people have fallen along the way. Now everyone's really sort of fast to that decision point. So then, what's the bottleneck from there? If decision-ready data is not the bottleneck?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, the bottleneck is actually transforming that data into something meaningful and you make decisions off of versus, because I mean, you guys, it's probably going to be the next evolution of your product is to take the data you've already done intelligently and reliably, but then actually provide decision trees or models or, so if you say you're going through, I don't know, I think there's a huge opportunity if you're cataloging this data, pulling this data, actually doing something with the data versus
Yeah,
just, spitting it out in a JSON and having a bot plug it into an application, but actually mining the data and creating, understandable models that, you know, things could fall out of that. So like,
yeah,
if you see like in the insurance case, and they're probably already doing this, most sophisticated insurance companies probably do this already, but like, taking out, like, say there was a car accident, like
mm,
insurance, and, taking all those discrete parts of that data and then figuring out, okay, this is actually someone who's under the age of 25, that drives a Jeep, they're unmarried, you know,
yep,
whatever. Maybe we don't, I don't know, whatever the decision tree falling out of that is, and like
yeah,
figuring out what to do with that. And I know a lot of companies already have these models, but I think the thing is they've not had the discrete data you can pull from these documents. I mean,
yep,
frankly, I also, one of the things I wrote in my blog too is imagine if you could take all of a company's, their entire life cycle of every printed document, scanned document, and you collected all that data and made it into something. I mean, you would have these supercharged companies. I mean, they've got all this like, digital debt sitting there.
yeah,
So, I think that's really where it's going to go. Because I think as people are looking for more advanced solutions or more decision making pre-human, they're just going to be looking for data however they can get it.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. And don't tell anyone, but I think unstructured analytics is the future of working with unstructured data. Like, you know, to your point, all that digital debt sitting around, it's kind of like crude oil sitting in the ground, right? Like, and to date, we've built drills and we've built some pipes to get it out of the ground and move it around. And there's a lot more of that to do, by the way. We're
Yeah.
not going to go, we're not going to be bored anytime soon.
No.
But the future is really refinement, right? And get it into, from raw bytes in a PDF to a real, usable asset on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first you just got to get the piping in there first, and then we can start figuring out best ways to use these. And the analytics tools are going to get better. I mean, they've already gotten a
Yeah,
lot better. Where you don't need a full data scientist to create a machine learning model. I mean,
yeah,
I, I could do it. Not to say that I'm not sophisticated, but I'm not a data scientist or anything like that. So
yeah. That's a great point. Coming back to that idea of just the digital debt that some companies are drowning in right now. Um, how do you think about that debt? Like, what is the cost? What's the risk of just maintaining unmanaged, unstructured content as we're doing it now, sort of status quo?
well, I'll pull it into the analogy I frequently use about IT and legacy systems. So they say an average IT department spends about 70% of their budget maintaining legacy systems. So paying all the support and all that. And then
Yeah.
there's another implication for the organizations themselves having to use these legacy systems. So the problem just kind of balloons. So if you're like working on a legacy system and you have your new system, there's a lot of, going into this system to make sure everything's cool and going to the other system.
Yep.
I kind of look at this in the same situation where if you don't get a strategy for IDP or document understanding now, it's only going to get worse because your company's going to grow and there's going to be more
Yeah.
inbound. And then you have that issue. And then it falls down after that too, because it's not being indexed properly. So, if a doctor comes in and says, "Gosh, where's this order? This was in here." Or the doctor may not even know there was an order and have to go place another order of the same exact order,
Yeah.
and kind of thing. So like it's really a problem that now that there's a solution, there's really no reason why people shouldn't or companies shouldn't really adopt it.
Yeah. 100%. So we talked a little bit. So we've looked in the far future. We've looked a little bit in the recent past. Let's dig a little bit more into the past. So talked about the tools getting better. You've talked about people being more educated about what's possible. You've talked about the right approach being managed service to handle all of the things that you're not thinking of when you think about let's just automate this part of this process. Um, how have you seen the use cases that are being approached change in terms of whether it's vertical or complexity or whatever it is, as we've hit this sort of inflection point that we're at?
Yeah, well, it really depends on the where customers are in their automation journey.
Yeah,
Some are still back in the, oh, great, I could take this spreadsheet of data and put it into a system. There's still a lot of those out there.
yeah,
Um, and those are a lot of our like quote unquote legacy bots, I guess you could say. But it is getting it's getting more sophisticated, particularly the use of APIs, even within our bots themselves to, hook into like Salesforce or ServiceNow, or, I know even on the EMR standpoint, there's the new fire standard in healthcare is
ah,
something that we're highly evaluating, and we have a partner that we're working with on that. So it's also too, we've seen an uptick on attended automations, kind of the human in the loop aspect, which IDP definitely falls right into as well.
yeah,
Uh, so we're seeing quite a bit there. Um, we're also seeing, yeah, a real need to, okay, we have this problem. We're having an issue onboarding, offboarding employees at scale. You know,
yeah,
seeing that quite a bit, where that was something that was certainly mentioned as a high value use case, but not really taken seriously enough because there was, not the labor market wasn't as tight as it is right now. So like we don't have
right,
someone in that from a compliance standpoint, in any company is a problem. Um, as you try to maintain your credential or your licenses and things like that and your certifications, that has to be done quickly. So we're seeing a bit more of that. I also think companies are doing this at scale, like they're approaching this with a mindset of scale. We have several customers that have said we want to automate 16 different departments within our organization. It's a $5 billion, $6 billion revenue company, huge. And we've had other ones in the Fortune 1000 realm doing the same thing. We want to double our revenue. We want to get going here, but we're not going to be able to hire enough people to do this. So we need to come
ah,
up with an automation first strategy.
yeah,
Where
yeah,
18, 19, when we started this company, was like, well, I think I have that one thing we want to do, or I have three, 1 to 2 different bots we want to do. And, you know, I think UiPath and others and, Indico have done a really good job of marketing what's possible, and letting people know. Even Microsoft's entry into, the RPA space has been very helpful
yes,
for gathering awareness. So like several years ago, we talked to people in IT who had no idea what RPA was. Now they kind of
yeah,
know, oh, like Power Automate or whatever. So it's all helpful.
yeah, absolutely. Um, let's let's see. Sorry, I'm blanking. There's something in there that you said that I wanted to drill into. I'm gonna have to edit this part out. What was it? It's a great little nugget. Oh, yeah. You were talking about the difference between attended and unattended bots, and you were talking about how IDP sort of drives you to the attended side of things. Um, my experience has been folks that come to Indico mature in automation. They often don't understand the need to have a human in the loop. Not only the need, but the value of doing it. You know, the assumption is I put document in, everything comes out perfect. I never see it. But of course, it almost never works that way for a lot of reasons. So how do you talk? How do you talk people off of that ledge of just I thought it was going to be 100% straight through?
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, with your verification station too, there's that human in the loop element to this. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think what we try to set the expectation to say, if it's Indico or whatever we're trying to process,
yeah,
bot quote unquote is going to be able to do, I don't know, 80% of this, right? Without you even worrying about it. But there's
yeah,
going to be that 20% where you need to review what's going on, and it may be something that it's simple click. Oh yes, this is a ID number. Boom, done. Bot
yeah,
handle. But it may require more intervention, like there's missing information, or the information that the bot or the Indico is trying to get just isn't completely there. Or it may be something that they need to pick up the phone and call someone.
yeah,
Or, so like those kind of things, you have to be realistic about what is actually possible, because there's no turnkey solutions. I mean, even our bots that are unattended that run, they all create reports and there's exceptions on all of them.
yeah.
Not
Okay,
just say once in a while. I'm not going to say they're all there, but
right.
there's exceptions. That someone will go look at the report after the bots run, process them. So that's a human in the loop scenario. Um,
Absolutely.
at scale, if there's a lot of them, then you build automation to help process those. But if it's just a handful, there's no need to create a bot that does all that legwork.
No, that's right. And I think one of the things that's important to point out is that pure RPA bots don't get smarter over time, but your document processing solutions, assuming they're ML based, can. And so it's really valuable to keep, as your data flows change, as your analysts change the way they do the job, it's important to keep flowing that supervised data back into the model to keep it. Um, it's almost like ongoing on the job training, right? The bot is, it's mimicking that human knowledge worker, and you need to keep it up to speed on how things are going and what's coming through.
Yeah, and the bot, I mean, it does get more intelligent in a way that you get it's a feedback loop coming from SMEs to say, hey, CampTek, we need this adjusted with the bot. We need to add
Yeah,
these things. So it's more of a manual intervention versus an automated, you
right.
know, intelligence. And frankly, and I know that UiPath and others are thinking of ways that they can, have their bots heal or get more intelligent. But I'm a little weary of that, because you can't just say, please go do this, and then you have it go make a bunch of, business rules or
Yeah,
whatever without some type of intervention. But I know that it is coming. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that one.
yeah. Have you tried the experiment? Like, hey, Chat GPT, write me a UiPath bot that does X and Y.
No, but I know it's possible.
Okay, stay tuned for that. That's
No,
exciting.
I think that stuff's really exciting to me. But I still think any kind of auto-generated code always scares me to some degree. And
For sure.
granted, everything is fairly componentized at this point and object oriented, but you still need to know kind of what it's doing. And we were talking about automating at scale with enterprise level systems. You have to be very careful.
Yeah,
It's no different than creating a PowerShell script that can wipe out your entire Active Directory with like
yeah,
one backslash. Like
yeah.
so.
That's right.
You have to be careful.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, it's the same problem as like a room full of devs and none of them are listening to what the architect is saying, right? Like, and ChatGPT ain't no architect at this point. Maybe someday.
And it could be. I think there's a lot of potential there. Particularly even from a code review standpoint, it could certainly do quite a bit there.
Yeah,
It could also help, developers that, you know, how are they developed? Maybe their development cycles it's kind of start at the higher end and then build
Yep.
the depth there. Um, but even from a reusability standpoint, if you're like, I want to use this library, boom,
Yeah.
please, then it just throws it in. So, I think it is exciting, but like a lot of other technologies, it takes a little while for it to take hold. But I mean, the fact Microsoft's really making a pretty decent sized bet on it and they want to
Yeah.
into all their applications, it's only going to get more sophisticated.
No. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Um,
But
so, yeah, go
that's
ahead.
that's also the reason why managed services are so important.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you could a company like ours can do that research, figure out what works, what doesn't. We do a ton of R&D behind the scenes. Evaluating these technologies, working with them, trying to figure out, okay, these use cases we had before, how much better is this technology than what we were using? Or, go out and try this new RPA platform, see how it compares. So it's like that just saves a lot of legwork and confusion for our customers.
Interesting. All right, I want to circle back to that, but while we're talking about the right tools for the right project within an organization, how does CampTek go about helping your customers find the best candidates for a process or workflow or whatever it is that could be automated?
Yeah, so we have a few different approaches. We have the traditional, interviewing SMEs, trying to figure out where the pain points of the business are, focusing on those areas. Um, you know, Doing scoping sessions, things like that, having business analysis, figure out where pain points are in departments or across the business, and focusing on those. That to us is one way of doing this. Another way that we've really started to stand up within the last year or so is using task mining. So we'll
Ah,
have task mining agents on desktops. So we have a few organizations that are like, we do want to automate, but we're not really sure what we want to automate. And we want
huh,
to collect data from our employees, but our employees are so busy they can't sit with you for hours on end. And then it becomes very subjective, and employees have a way of describing the process different than it probably is described, and it's
yeah,
all biased in some ways. Task mining isn't. Task mining will sit there, observe a group of people doing a similar job function for a week or 2 weeks or however long it takes, and then it will provide, okay, this is where these are the common tasks that people are doing. This is where we not only think there's opportunities for automation, but this is how we'd actually automate this, and coming up with those.
interesting.
So, like in the case of the joint use case you guys are working on, we actually did a task mining study with that group and
Ah,
found how much time they were spending on that task
fascinating.
and putting real numbers because they couldn't tell us exactly. So we have really good identifiable numbers in and around that. Um, so I think that's definitely a way, and that technology is only getting better and better. Whether you use UiPath or whether you use Celonis or any of those tools, but basically you're using that as the engine to kind of figure out what people are doing from a top level. Then I think the other thing is to once you kind of get in there, use cases will just sort of pop out once they kind of understand,
Hmm,
oh wow, this bot's doing this for me. I'm sure I have the same exact thing, or I have a group of people doing a similar type thing at the other part of the organization that I believe that automation could use. So you tackle it
yeah,
from both the hands on the ground aspect, the automated with task mining, and then using, a backlog delivery tool, a backlog creation tool where people can submit ideas. They're evaluated like Automation Hub from you,
nice.
and you can put ROIs and look at the historical values and then attach the PDDs to the different opportunities and track them. And you know that's how you scale this. Right? And you can also
Yeah,
use process discovery too, which is a whole nother animal in itself. But finding the low level tasks, I think task mining is a good place to start, and then you can look at more of the higher level business process management tools of like process discovery.
yeah. When you do get to that higher level, how much do you all invest in sort of process redesign before you sit down and put hands to keyboard?
Yeah, so one thing a lot of these tools do discover is I mean, all three approaches all end up having some level of process redesign,
Okay.
or sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, we thought this process was more mature than it is. We need to figure this process out before we're going to automate it. So it eliminates the, automating a bad process, which is rule number one, never do. Um, so, there is that process improvement aspect. The other thing we have seen too quite a bit now in the post-COVID age is using task capture as a way of documenting a process, because a lot of businesses don't have their processes fully documented. You know,
Interesting.
so, with turnover and things like that, so they'll use like task capture, which has nothing to do with automation other than it's a UiPath product, to capture their day to day, and then it creates a fully formed process document for them to say, okay, this person
Interesting.
doing this with SAP once a month, and here's the process, and boom, 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 there it is, documented, save it. So if that person's not there that month, or they leave the company, at least there's some documented, process.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that quite a bit too.
Interesting. Hedge against the key person risk built right in.
Yeah, yeah,
I
right.
like that. It's
It's
exciting.
yeah.
So let's go back. You were talking about one of the value adds for CampTek is that you're constantly kicking the tires on the new and shiny when it comes out. Just as an organization, what's the sort of whether it's time or dollars or whatever, what's the proportion of your sort of budget that goes towards that R&D type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as a newer company, quite a bit. We're at about 25 to 30%, I believe. We have budgeted this year. Last year is a little bit more. But yeah, we basically take 25 to 30% of our budget and put it towards R&D. And R&D can include the technology, but also can include operations, building our operations out, making sure
Yeah,
that we're continuing to serve our customers in a proactive way. Um, so one of the things starting the company is to make sure their operations are sound and they continue to improve, because we can always improve our operations. So like, you know, we put a significant amount of our revenue that we've gotten from our clients to R&D.
right on. That sounds healthy. Sounds like a way to stay ahead of the curve. So let's talk a little bit now about the way you engage with new clients, and I want you to sort of spill the tea a little bit on when you go into an engagement. What do you see warning signs of, like, this isn't going to go well? These people don't have their stuff together. Like, what is it that sort of tips you off to that?
Well, one of which, are you talking pre-sales or actual when we've signed the deal?
Oh, I'd love to hear about either. You can
Okay.
take it in whichever order you want.
Yeah, so pre-sales, a lot of times they don't really have a budget, or
Sure.
isn't necessarily high of mind yet. I think also too, one thing we do in pre-sales before we get statements of work or we sign customer agreements is to do some scoping of what they think they want to
Sure.
automate. Right then and there, it's usually a starter or non-starter. So that what will happen frequently is, one, they may not be prepared for the scope call, which does happen. That doesn't happen as often as, oh, in the middle of it, like, oh gosh, this isn't something we should automate, or we still haven't gotten this defined yet, or you
Okay.
know, this isn't the right person that should be showing this to you guys. Those kind of things kind of like help identify. We're not going to sign we're not going to sign a contract with a customer that we don't believe it's a good automation candidate. It's not even worth it. I mean, from a
Yeah.
resource standpoint, from a lot of different ways, it's not even worth it. And we've had to actually turn some people away, or some customers away, where we're like, you're not ready, you want to do this, but you know, do X, Y, and Z before we can move forward. Um, that being said, when you get to the post-sales implementation aspect, it's really, you talked a little bit about identifying use cases and
Yeah.
building the backlog. It's, I think, the hardest things that we face with new customers is one, which sounds really, and you guys probably run into the same thing, is getting access, getting
Oh
access,
yeah.
getting all that stuff approved. That takes longer than building the bot. Like we can build a bot in 4 to 6 weeks, but sometimes access can take 3 months, and
Yeah.
and that's always been that way since I've been doing this. Sometimes access can take like 3 hours, and it really, so I think that's and that to me says a lot of different things. The company's not ready for external party to come in and manage the service, or they're not structurally ready to supply these access controls to us.
Yep.
We do a lot, particularly with some of our larger customers. Well, most of them at this point, we do security reviews with them before we sign a contract. So sit with IT, explain where we're coming from, where the data is going to live, in our cloud, maybe in their cloud, on
Yep.
their prem, not on their prem, depending on what their security model looks like. As things have gotten more cloud receptive, a lot of companies are like, we don't really want to manage this. We work with other managed
Yeah.
services like you guys, as long as you're SOC 2 and you have the references and all that other stuff, we're good to go. And that they're faster moving. But it's things like it is access to the problem. And then it's SME access. So we've
Yeah.
run into issues where fully formed, simple bots. I mean, I'm not talking really tough ones. Where it's like we're working with a customer and the SME is not available for weeks. That's the one person in the whole organization that knows that one process that they want to automate. So that slows things down.
Yeah.
And then we always find the first few are probably the hardest to kind of get the companies working their head around it, thinking about ways to automate or what kind of questions we're going to be asking. After the first few, it really starts to take off. And
Yeah.
because they see what our process is, they understand what they need to do, what they can expect. And it really starts to get some level of scale. And we're seeing that with all of our customers, they grow over a 30 to 40% clip year over year.
Wow.
But the first 6 months to a year, depending on the scale, can be a little challenging.
Yeah, there's a little dip, then you take off, right? You have to wander in the desert for a while. It's interesting you mentioned the SME axis. We have SMEs often in our platform supervising the models, right? Just labeling the data. And they're often the worst model supervisors because they have all of this business knowledge in their heads and they'll see 3 different things and then they highlight this as the key piece of information. And then they're shocked when the model doesn't pick up on it. It's like, well, you got to give it A, B, and C before you get to D. Have you
Yeah,
had similar things where the SMEs sort of like, it's almost like they don't even remember why they do things anymore. They've been doing it so long.
yeah, or they don't, or they're really not the SME.
Well,
Or
yeah,
the
that's a whole other ball of wax.
or like yes, yeah, no, we've definitely had that issue with SMEs that are like, I don't know if they get brain freeze or something when they start talking to us. But yeah, no, I mean, God love them, But that's why I think task mining could be really helpful because
Yeah.
you sort of get the idea of what it is before we even talk to them. So like if we do talk to the SME or when we scope with the SME, it's more of a validation of what we're seeing with task mining.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then they can help with the things that, look like outliers or strange circumstances. Yeah. Yeah.
the SMEs are technical. So if you're giving an SME that's not technical, they may be a world-class accountant or finance person, but they don't have the logic, the business or the development logic to be like,
Yeah.
okay, the dependency stuff. So once again, managed services are helpful in that respect too, because we can just take what the SME gives us from a document standpoint, teach the models, figure that out, and help them over, when that verification needs to occur.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're about to round out on our time together. So I want to focus on, we talked about the far future. Let's talk about the near term future again. If you could have, wiggle your nose, rub the bottle, whatever it is, if you could have one wish for what technology could get built into these IDP platforms or what feature could be built into these IDP platforms that you work with, What's the one thing that's missing right now that would unlock the most potential?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think a reliable template. I mean, I know Abby has done a decent job with like invoices and things, but real intelligence built into the intelligence. You
Yeah.
know, so if you're trying to do invoices, you're trying to do whatever it is, like in healthcare, like pull out medical records, have these pre-built models as a starting point. Um, and it really could help a time in the market a lot quicker for a development team. And you know, the issue that we've seen with these pre-built models with other companies is they're not that reliable. So you end up having
Mm.
to do a lot more work outside of the model. But just really building, so that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Cataloging this data over time and understanding, okay, this is what a telephone, I mean, not to say you guys don't know what a telephone number is,
Yeah.
but or specialized ID. So if you're
Yep.
working with an insurance company, they have their own ID system. Understanding what those are, what the most common ID structures could be for insurance or financial services or whatever it is. That kind of thing. I think that would be hugely helpful. I think the feedback loop stuff with the customer is good. It can break down too a little bit at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you need that like hand holding with, whether it be you guys with your support or our support or whatever it might be.
Good. Good. I like that answer. I think that again, back to the concept I mentioned before, where we've got pipes and we've got plumbing, and you can get things, you run it through this pipe and this comes out the other side, right? Really capturing a representation of a document along the way and being able to say, I've seen this before and it tripped me up. And that's another one of the things that excites me about models like GPT 3.5 is they do seem like they sort of learn on the fly as they see examples. So I think there's a bright future
Yeah.
there. Um, all right, bring us home, Peter. What should the folks listening out there, whether they're sort of boots on the ground building bots, they're leading a COE, maybe it's different answers for everybody involved, but what should they take away from this episode as we wrap up?
Well, I think one of which is the technology, both from our RPA's perspective and an intelligent document processing standpoint, is here. It's available. It's reliable. It's industry tested. From all different perspectives. I mean, RPA itself has been around for 30 plus years in one way or another.
Yeah,
But now we have these highly sophisticated enterprise platforms that can deliver. Indico is using techniques that have been around for quite a while as well, but really taking it to the next level using intelligence and artificial intelligence and machine learning to tackle it from a completely different perspective. Um, Non-positional, which is huge. There's no relation between, it's not key value pairs any longer, which is, Amazon uses that with
yeah,
Textract. But so, really tackling the problem, having the technology can really support the use case, but also understanding what the use case is and what technology could really be the best to use in that use case, and not having to go through, a whole years of discovery with different IDP
right.
tools, and just kind of zipping to the head of the class and saying, you know what, this is what it's going to be. I can get the ROI. We're not going to have to maintain this as much. It's going to work. Whatever it might be. And I think that's really what I'm focused on, especially this year.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a big year for intelligent document processing, and more sophisticated RPA bots.
yeah, I love it. So to sum that up into a few bullet points, you have a need to deal with your unstructured data. The tools are good enough, and make sure you work with someone like the good folks at CampTek who have done this before and know what the best practices are and can provide the services you need to get there. Is that fair?
Yes.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Peter, for joining me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. And just to send us home, this has been Unstructured Unlocked, and I've been joined by Peter Camp, who is the CTO and founder of CampTek Software. Thanks again, Peter.
Thanks, Chris.